Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Our Vision, Our Voice, which is presented in conjunction with StudVoice.org. I'm your host, Steve Figurelli. Our first 6 episodes are airing as part of Student Voice in a Box, a resource to support teachers with best practices as they endeavor to incorporate authentic student voice into their classrooms. Today, we are very excited to have Amaranth Weiss with us. Hi, Amaranth. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So I'd like to start out by just learning a little bit about our guests. So if you would, just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your experiences in school, and maybe a little bit about what you're doing now.
Of course. Well, I just graduated from high school here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And in just a couple weeks, I'm going to be starting my first year at Roanoke College. I'm going to be an English and anthropology major. Could not be more excited. So a little bit of a background on my education. Kind of been kind of a unique journey. I was home educated through 10th grade. That gave me a ton of opportunity for self-directed learning, which has really shaped my idea of what I feel education, how I kind of build my ideas about education reform. And it really gave me a lot of ideas for kind of, well, when I was, probably 8 or 9 years old, I started kind of wanting to start my own school and definitely work in education reform. So being able to lead my own education for a large part of my life really formed my ideas of how I kind of want to go forward with, making the school system different for a lot of other students. When I was in 11th grade, I joined a dual enrollment program at my local community college. So that gave me the opportunity to take a full course load of college classes in addition to my high school work. Every semester for the last 2 years of high school, that went towards my college education as well as my high school education. So it was a great experience. I got to work with a few different professors at that school. So there were some really good role models and some different types of teachers than I'd had before. And then my senior year of high school, I decided to actually go to my local arts magnet school, so to have the public school experience, kind of to round everything out. So that was a really interesting experience as well. So all of my experience with the different types of education, different types of classrooms have really formed my ideas that I've been able to present with my work with Student Voice and my future. Because I've had diverse experiences with different types of classrooms that have given me different ideas of ideas that work and models that don't work as well and things that work for different types of learning styles that I've seen. So I could not be more thrilled to be working with Student Voice on kind of sharing some of my ideas.
Awesome, and congratulations from graduating.
Thank you.
So yeah, so this podcast was born out of work I've been doing with Stu Voice as well, and the whole idea is that teachers can learn so much from students. Most of the time in the classroom is dominated by the teachers, in a sense, teaching the students. But if we as educators just took a moment to stop and listen to students, we could learn so much. And so that's how the idea for this podcast began, because students have so much to um, offer and so much to teach us, and I felt that it was critical to give them, for no pun, a voice, so that or at least a platform, to share their experience and some suggestions, strategies, advice that from a student's point of view for teachers. So I again thank you for joining us. But thinking through the idea of student voice, that phrase tends to have a bit of ambiguity to it. And so, to you, what does student voice mean? What does it look like in the classroom?
Well, I think it can really range from, just a small amount of representation to a larger amount of representation. It can involve technology. It can not involve technology. It can take place simply within the classroom. It can take place outside of the classroom in the outside world. So it is a little bit ambiguous no matter how we define it, because it's such a broad term. But I think the core of student voice, I think it's, for me, and the way I've modeled my work for student voice, um, the way that I interpret it is that it kind of has a short-term effect and a long-term effect. The short-term effect is very important. It's definitely giving students validity, which is a really basic human need. And when we go to school, 7 or 8 hours of the day, for 13 years, when we go to public school, and then we move on to college for more years, especially when we're in, elementary and secondary school, we're in a situation where our decisions are largely made by adults. And while that's important, and I'm not going to say that, students are able to make all their decisions, because they're minors, It's very important that for as far as having self-worth and feeling independent and being able to come up with their own ideas, it is very important that students do have a voice in the classroom, whether it be just being able to express their opinions or lead their own projects or just take their own surveys or anything that kind of gives them a voice so that they feel like they're able to make their decisions and that their opinions have validity. That would be a very, a short-term, in-the-moment reason that student voice is so important is that it gives you students validity. It kind of goes against depression at that age because students feel more valid. It definitely goes against bullying because students are able to share with each other. And honestly, it's kind of a feeling of oppression if for a lot of students who are in a classroom where they're not able to speak up. That's what leads to uprisings or bad behavior and bullying and all those things that we hear about in school. So that would be the short term. On a long-term basis, I think it's very important that students are able to speak up in school and to run their own classes, which is a project I worked on with Student Voice, is a framework for a completely student-run classroom. If students are able to formulate a voice, formulate their opinions, learn how to formulate their opinions, learn how to critically think about other ideas and their opinions, and share their opinions, this is preparing them for life in a corporate world, in an educational, academic environment, professional environment, a skilled job, wherever they choose to go with their next step of their journey. It's very important that students come out of school with the ability to have these life skills, and having a voice and having your own identity and opinions is really at the core of that. So I think that's the kind of the idea of student voice. And I think, honestly, as long as the students are able to speak up and express their opinions in class, that's what student voice is. It doesn't really matter your approach to it. As long as the student is able to feel validated and the student is able to, all students are able to participate equally.
Great, absolutely. Can you think of a time, just as a follow-up to that, through your schooling, where you felt empowered to sort of direct your own learning or speak up in an academic setting in a classroom?
Right. Well, I'm actually going to take kind of two different answers to that, if you
Sure.
don't mind. Because since I was home educated for such a long time, I'm not saying that I didn't have teachers. I definitely had experience with online courses, and I had we did like private co-ops, which is another type of education I had experience with, where it wasn't necessarily being home educated at home, but it was maybe families who didn't want to participate in an institution kind of getting together to work on school together with maybe some professionals or parents who were certified teachers. So for that part of my life, I was largely self-guided, and I would say the biggest opportunity that I had to express my own voice and make my own choices and guide my own learning would certainly have been when I was home educated, because I was able to make my lesson plan for the week and decide what I wanted to get done, and it really gave me such a sense of responsibility for what I was doing when I chose to do it and I got it done. I passed an AP test, from self-study or whatever I had chosen to do. If I did a research project or I had written an essay, I felt really good about that. So I would say that really built my self-discipline skills, because I had a week, or I had a school year, and I had things that I needed to get done, and it was up to me to be able to fit that in. So I'm definitely not saying that everybody needs to be that self-guided, and certainly everybody doesn't have the resources to be educated outside of a public school setting, and I really don't think that they need to be. I just think it is very important that in school students are able to make some of their own decisions. That's where the student-led classroom kind of ties in, giving them kind of an opportunity to run their own course so they feel responsible for their education, they feel accountable for it. It definitely gives you more ownership, and it makes a student definitely feel more like they need to put more of themselves into the work because it's theirs, it's their thing. A time that I felt empowered to speak up in class, I would not say that was while I was at home by myself doing my own work. If you don't mind, I would like to use an example not from any class that I took in a strictly academic setting during the school year. I actually like to use an example from a summer program that I participated in after my freshman year of high school.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
And this was, it was a program called Genesis at Brandeis University. And it was about 80 high school students from 8 different countries all came to campus for a month during the summer, and we got to take an experiential college class. And it was totally hands-on. I took a world religions class, and we were able to go all around the city of Boston, visiting different religious sites and participating in worship services and totally having the experience of several different cultures. So I thought that was very important. Experiential learning is always very important. But another element of the course was that there was nothing you couldn't say. We had discussions about everything. And if you said something, there was nothing that you could say that you would get criticized for or get in trouble for. It was a completely safe environment. And I grew so much that summer from being able to exchange ideas with other people and being kind of striking down those walls of having a teacher and having multiple students who are all kind of, no one's able to really speak up and, against the teacher, but everybody's kind of competing for good grades and success, and it's very, cutthroat environment, kind of breaking down the walls of that and just being able to be in a setting where everyone was learning from each other and everyone's opinion was as valid as the next person's and as valid as the teacher's. That was the first time that I really felt very empowered to speak up in a classroom. I felt like I was being heard, and I felt like I was learning from everything that everyone was saying. So I think open discussion and feeling like the space is safe to discuss, anything that might be on anyone's mind, especially with pertaining, to coursework, is just really fundamental.
Yeah, and I think it's so powerful. One of the fundamental tenets of what we need to do as teachers is create that safe environment for kids to feel comfortable speaking without risk of feeling ridiculed or put down if the answer is not what the teacher was looking for or somewhat unexpected. And,
Exactly.
and I think that I think it's great that you were able to experience that, with that course. And so I guess thinking more in terms of that too, were there specific strategies or specific rules or norms in place that the professor or the students implemented in order to achieve that learning environment? So I heard you say how safe you felt to speak up, which was amazing. But how did that become established?
Honestly, I don't remember ever having rules around it. It was kind of how it happened. And it's very interesting because whenever I talk about a student-led classroom, ideas for, student-led classrooms or classrooms where students get to speak up or any kind of different type of classroom, the first reaction that I'll get is, either we can't do that in the school system, like that students wouldn't learn, or, well, what kind of rules would you have to implement that? And when I kind of think back to my experiences with courses like that where I was able to speak up, different types of public speaking courses I've had, and in this course that I'm talking about, I don't remember having any rules. I just remember kind of you set that precedent on the first day of class that it's really an environment of mutual respect. The teacher commands respect. The students are able to command respect from one another. I never noticed that there needed to be any rules established. The groups that I participated in were definitely self-selecting. So, I don't think that if you put this exact model in the public school system, you wouldn't need rules. But I don't remember having any kind of rule. I think it was more just a precedent, like, you don't dare disrespect this environment. No one ever would dare to disrespect that environment, and I don't think it ever occurred to anyone. I think the reason that a lot of disrespect happens in educational settings is because students feel disrespected themselves. I don't think it would happen if students felt respected. That's just kind of an idea that I have based on my own experience. But I can't say if it would work for sure.
No, yeah, I agree. The establishment of mutual respect is just so critical. So, since a majority of the listeners will identify with a more traditional classroom setting, with the sort of state mandated, local mandated curriculum, and more of a public school setting, in your opinion, how would you encourage teachers in that more traditional setting, where perhaps they don't have as much flexibility, or at least they feel like they don't have as much flexibility? How would you encourage those teachers, or what advice can you give those teachers on how to incorporate more of student voice into their lessons or learning experiences in a traditional public school setting?
That is a really good question. So the most recent project that I worked on with Student Voice was a student-led classroom framework. So it definitely it allots roles to every student in the class, they rotate every class period so that students can have different, experiences with different types of leadership roles in the classroom. The way that it kind of compromises between totally being student-led and, of course, still adhering to the curriculum and the state standards is that it's a student-led class about the material that needs to be covered in, whatever school system requirements or curriculum requirements that are obviously in place. So the way that it kind of works is that there every week or every class period, it kind of rotates out. There is a different students who facilitates the meeting to get some leadership experience, students who write different projects kind of or warm-ups, class discussions pertaining to the course material, and then students, instead of having a teacher present the class information, the students take turns presenting class information. So they're kind of sent home with an assignment to research a certain topic. Let's say if it's a science class, we're taking biology, we're going to go home and this person's going to research cell division this week, and then they come to class and they do a presentation or they lead a discussion on that topic. So the students are still having conversations with each other. It's definitely building the environment of mutual respect because the students are all having an equal share and leading the classroom, and they are depending on one another for information that they need to pass tests and everything and do projects. But it's still covering all of the necessary course material. And I think disciplinary action is still in place, if the students are not coming prepared. But I think that after a couple times, if you're not coming prepared to class, you're going to stop that because you're the one who is supposed to be presenting the lesson today, or you're the one who is supposed to be running the meeting, and you're responsible for your education, and you're depending on other students to be responsible for your education. So I think that really places a lot of the responsibility on students. Still gets, hopefully, optimally can get everything done as far as the curriculum, the subject matter goes, but definitely has students depending on one another, which definitely promotes the respect.
Yeah, and it also builds in accountability as well because
yeah, absolutely.
Students tend not to want to let their peers down, and so oftentimes they'll respond, positively to opportunities not to, let their peers down and drop the ball, for instance.
Exactly.
Have you experienced this? The framework you've just described sounds amazing. Have you experienced this, or is this a sort of idea that you were able to flesh out as part of the Student Voice project?
Well, I think it's a kind of combination of both. I've definitely been working on ideas for how students can run a classroom based on my experience running my education and my experience being in a classroom ever since I started school. But I have definitely based the student-led classroom framework around the framework that I used in a Toastmasters International Gavel Club, which was another really formative experience for me as far as education goes and as far as my education philosophy. I participated in Gavel Club at 3 different times in my life. We definitely, when we came into the class, it was really normal middle and high school stuff. Normal dynamic where kids are picking on each other and there's a lot of competition and the officers are being elected based on popularity versus merit, and it was just a very typical kind of lackluster middle and high school setting. And by the end of the class, where we had all gotten opportunities to lead the classroom, or we had gotten opportunities to speak to each other and kind of put ourselves out there and be vulnerable, but at the same time that was very respectable. We had become like best friends. Like every time that I did it, we were so close, and I would never have been friends with that many people at a time if I hadn't, we hadn't put ourselves out there to each other. So when I did that, especially the last time I did it was in 10th grade, it was so apparent to me, like if students run their classroom and if students are all able to put themselves out there, not only do they become more confident in themselves and their speaking skills and their critical thinking skills and all that, good stuff, but they become very much more respectful of each other. So that's really where I got the idea to make the student-led classroom and to use the framework that I use. I kind of imitated the Toastmasters setting in that there are, people take turns presenting, as in Toastmasters. It's a public speaking club. So every week, or if their meetings are weekly or bi-weekly, there's a different person who runs the meeting, and there's a different person who evaluates, and then there are people who present, and there are people who evaluate. So that's kind of how my setting worked in a sense only, instead of just presenting about, what we did on Saturday, or, our love for horses or whatever. We could talk about whatever we wanted in that class. This is presenting on an assignment based on the teacher, and everybody gets a chance. So that's where I took it from. And there are evaluators in my model as well to kind of hold the students accountable, which is a huge, huge thing that I learned from Toastmasters. It's very important.
So you know what? I love the idea that the framework helps, not only with the accountability, as you mentioned earlier, but it also helps build relationships. And you know oftentimes, or at least some of the time, secondary folks will get caught up in covering content. It becomes so content driven that the human element is almost sucked out of school, and it becomes a drag, for many students. And so, one of the many really great things about the framework is that it does promote positive relationships, not only between student to student, but because the teacher is then becoming a true facilitator of the framework of the learning. It'll help establish the relationships between teacher and student, which, for one reason or the other, isn't as prevalent in some of our mainstream public secondary schools.
Absolutely. And that was another thing that I've really learned from my experience with education is when I've been in certain public school settings or community college settings, it's just like a mom and a teenage kid relationship between the teacher and the student. The kid is rebelling, they don't want to listen. The teacher's lashing out and getting angry, and it's very argumentative, and sometimes it's a disaster. Sometimes the students are just not listening to the teacher's giving in. It's harder with the group of students. And when I've been in a certain settings where I've had mentors, or private teachers one-on-one, or smaller group settings, those have been the greatest experiences of my life. I've made like the greatest, absolutely most profound relationships with my teachers out of any relationships I've ever had, and I would not give that up for anything. And I want everyone to have that experience where you can have a very strong relationship with your teacher, where you're going by yourself. You're not resenting the teacher for making you do projects you don't want to do or whatever. You're making your own decisions, but at the end of the day, you're going to mess up, and if you want help, your teacher is there for you. They've got your back, and they're your greatest mentor in life because they know what they're doing. If you're, taking a biology class, they're all about biology. If you need any help at all, they're there. They're supporting you 100% of the way. So I think that's another really important thing, is the teacher and the student getting some distance and kind of having a more balanced relationship so that the teacher-student relationship stays healthy, because it is so important.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. It's so true. And with that in mind, thinking back to your learning experience, who was your most influential teacher? And if you don't want to name names, that's fine. But what characteristics did he or she demonstrate?
Oh my goodness, I've had so many good teachers. I would definitely want to say the teachers that I had. It was two teachers that I had for the summer program that I mentioned previously. Because of we did become so close because they led these conversations where everyone could just be very raw and everyone just came very close together. We just respected and we worshipped those teachers because they took us on journeys that we could never have taken ourselves on, but they let us take ourselves on the journeys. They let us go through them by ourselves. They brought us to these points and then they said, here you go. You learn from here. And I think that's what a teacher should do, and then they should be there kind of to fall back on if you need anything, which you inevitably will, and you won't be afraid to ask your teacher if you respect them like that. So those teachers were very influential to me. I've definitely had a couple of music teachers who have been like mentors to me, and music for me has always been a big part of my life, and it's kind of been my big project that I was working on. If I was writing a song, or if I was working on performing a song, that was my thing. But they had mentored me every step of the way, and they were behind me 100%. So I would say probably my private teacher relationships with definitely my arts teachers, my music teachers, and then at that program were definitely the most influential teachers that I've had.
That's awesome. So what's next for you? I know you're starting school and you're super excited about it. And again, congratulations on your recent graduation. But where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Well, hopefully 10 years I will have finished graduate school. Hopefully in 5 I'll be in graduate school. That's always kind of been my plan. but I'm really not sure where life will take me. I definitely see myself working in academia no matter what. Right now, I'm, obviously just starting my bachelor's degree, so I'm not sure exactly where I'll go after that. I am studying English and anthropology. Kind of the plan is I would love to go to graduate school, get my PhD, and teach college and research and do anthropology. But if that doesn't work out for any reason, I am majoring in English so that I can teach in middle or high school. I definitely do want to get into the public school at some point because I think from the inside is the best place to reform. So if I did want to teach, middle or high school, teach secondary school, I would probably choose to teach English, probably writing and people, my two favorite things. So those are what I'm studying. But optimally, in 10 years, I would like to be researching and teaching at the collegiate level. I just love learning and I love researching and I love sharing knowledge. And that's what I can see myself doing.
Yeah, and your future students will be lucky to have you. The passion in which you speak is infectious. So they'll be incredibly fortunate to have you as their teacher or really as their guide. Yeah.
I'm honored. Thank you so much.
So I just had one final question. As teachers listen to your voice today, what final words would you leave with them?
I just want to say that I am not in any way discounting the voice of the student or the teacher. I think that they are very much equal. I think the teacher is the most important role model that you will ever have, possibly besides your parents, possibly even before that, depending on your situation. Um, you don't even know how influential you are to students' lives. You don't even know how much teachers have changed my life. Or changed my life. So be, just shine like a light. Just be a role model to your students. Be who you want them to be. Let them trip, let them fall, let them make mistakes because that'll be what prepares them for the outside world. Don't leave your students alone, but find that balance between letting the students have a voice that you can learn from and using your voice for students to learn from because they're both so important.
Uh, so powerful, absolutely. Um, so as we close up, where can folks find the framework that you were describing throughout this episode, in
Well,
case they
that
wanted
is
to
an
investigate more?
excellent question. Um, so this past week, hopefully you're all subscribed to Student Voice in a Box. We just released our first installment this past Monday. Um, my student-led classroom framework was released on our first installment. I think some of my work will be released on some future installments for just some ideas for activities you can participate in with your classroom. If you're not able to go all the way and run a fully student-led classroom, there's still going to be some ideas that I'm going to send out there and that Student Voice in a Box is going to send out there for you to promote student voice in your classroom. But I'm not sure if it's on the Student Voice website or if I can post a link, but if you are subscribed to Student Voice in a Box, you definitely would have received that on this past Monday.
Great, and if you're not, you can definitely sign up by visiting stuvoice.org, and the link is there to sign up for the Student Voice in a Box mailing list.
And please do.
So, Emma, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you the best of luck as you move forward in your academic career.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Yes, you too.
All
Have a
right,
good
bye.
summer.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.